Or to the cloud. Yay,
There
we
you
are
go.
recording. We remembered. So, hey, everybody. Welcome to our I've Decided to Be More Productive success group led by our awesome coach, Karen Shorey. We are so blessed to have such an amazing resource. And we're really excited about the success groups and excited about so many of you guys participating in them. And we hope that you're enjoying this as a part of your membership. There's no extra fees for these. They're included in your membership and just a great way to learn and grow and connect. And connecting is so important right now. So anyway, without further ado, I am going to go ahead and mute everyone that's on, just simply so it's easier for Karen not to be interrupted or have any background noise for the recording for anyone who's watching in the future, so that it will be clear and they can hear it. However, you have complete power to unmute yourself if you want to share or talk, or if Karen starts to ask for communication and you have something to say, just unmute yourself and chat, and then just kind of mute yourself back, and that way the noise will stay at a minimum. And don't forget the chat. You can make chats and ask questions in the chats, make comments. So that is a great way for all of us to communicate with each other while Karen is doing her presentation. And a great way for me to see questions that pop up and remind Karen at the end for questions that she might miss, because when you're doing the presentation, it's kind of hard to pay attention to the comments and the presentation all at the same time while you're talking to a screen, all at the same time. So I'll watch those chats there. All right, so I am going to go ahead and mute all, and then I'll have to unmute Karen and mute myself.
Okay. All right, I think you did it. And I'm going to share my screen and let's see if I can do this correctly. All right, can you see my screen? You'll get a thumbs up. Perfect. So like Kim mentioned, please feel free, I guess it would help if I start at the beginning. Feel free to put anything in the chat, you know, good, bad, or ugly. If I'm talking too fast, please tell me. This is like one of my favorite topics to talk about. So sometimes I do talk too fast. So like whatever it is, and Kim will have to like get my attention somehow. There's even like little, anyhow, you can play with Zoom. There's lots, you can like do a little thumbs up sign, or I mean, you could do a thumbs down, but that might make me sad. But we're gonna have fun talking about communication. I actually just finished working with a group of people just a few moments ago, and that's their focus the last couple of weeks was about communication. And I said it's one of those topics that I don't know if humans can ever fully master it, so it needs to be something that we're like on this progressive journey of always trying to master. So how in the world does productivity and communication go hand in hand? I hope at the end of our session today you'll understand the connection, but we can be productive by learning how to communicate. And so I think this will be a great session today. I'm looking forward to the aha moments. So I do encourage you, you're muted so I can't hear you, but minimize your distractions for your own personal benefit. Interact in the chat box. And as always, if you do anything with me, I do like to have fun. I love to laugh. I think laughter should be part of learning. But that's just my value. So we're going to talk about increasing your productivity through communication. And I'll show you our agenda. I'm trying to look to see which button I'm supposed to be clicking here. So 4 basic areas that we're going to talk about today. We'll probably spend maybe 10-ish minutes in each area. We're going to talk about empathy and how that interacts with communication. We're going to talk about understanding how our behavior affects communication. And then I've heard it said asking the right questions, but I don't feel like there's a right question. I feel there's powerful questions that we can ask. And then listening for the total message. So these are the 4 areas that we're going to spend time on. If you're on your computer, obviously if you're taking notes and you like to write, I'll try to be slow, to speak slow and not go too fast through my slides, but you can actually screenshot certain slides too. So if there's something, or if you completely miss a slide, just tell me in the chat box and I can go back to it, because there's a lot of good information on here. So I'm going to go ahead. Actually, I'm going to adjust so I can see all of you together on one page. I think that would be good. Hold on. There we go. Okay, I think I can see you all and I can still see my notes. So that's good. All right, so let's jump into empathy. If I were to ask you, so go ahead and unmute yourself. How would you define, or how would you differentiate empathy from sympathy? I'm curious how you guys would separate the two. Jennifer?
Me, Jennifer?
Yeah.
Well, I think that the difference is, I mean, sympathy is you sympathize with the situation. You know, you can, it's sort of a thinking process. Empathy to me is more of a feeling process.
Okay.
I may not be describing that very well, but it's just the concept of, oh yeah, that would be sad. That's more of a sympathy versus a actual feeling that sadness someone else might be feeling.
Okay, I like that. That's good. Anybody else want to share?
I think empathy is more of a maybe wearing those shoes than sympathy.
That's good. That's a hard one.
Sorry, I didn't say that right.
No, I think you did.
I was thinking that same thing, Karen. It was walking a mile in somebody's shoes is the empathy part. Kind of sympathy is extending, like, I feel, or I'm sorry, you're feeling that way, where empathy is, you know, I agree with what Deb said. It's walking in somebody's shoes.
Yeah. Yeah. So like sympathy is exactly that. It would be like, you know, I'm sorry you feel that way. Empathy would be like, well, no wonder you feel that way. Like you're putting on their lens. Like we all have lenses. Susan, I see your hand.
Okay. Somebody had mentioned to me one time, and I thought it was powerful, that it's possible to be sympathetic but still be condescending to someone, that we're sorry they're going through it, but maybe we can still portray or feel some condescension, whereas true empathy says, I feel what you're going through, maybe because I've experienced it too, but there's no condescension here. I'm right down there with you.
Love it. That's so true, because you can, especially if you're in a conflict situation, and I don't know if maybe I'm the only one, but I have gotten to the place where I've been like maybe in an argument with someone and they're just being so hard-headed, and I look at them, and I have uttered this, now I think it more than I say it, but like, I feel sorry for you. That's condescending. Nobody wants to hear that. But if I can stop myself, especially in an argument, and go, whoa, no wonder you feel that way. I never thought of it that way before. Put myself in their shoes and go, oh my goodness. Well, of course, if that's how you're seeing things, well, no wonder you took my comment wrong. So let me see if I can reframe what I just said. And you can completely change the trajectory. It's very, very well said. Thank you for sharing that, Susan. All right. I'm playing with your pictures, trying to move them on my screen, but we'll just leave them. I'm trying to look at you, and then I realize I'm not looking at you. I'm looking off to the side, but whatever. It is what it is. I don't know if I will ever master Zoom, but we'll give a whirl at it. So empathy is so important in communication. William James, you have the quote up here on the screen, the greatest human need is to be understood and appreciated. To feel valued by another person is huge. And when we feel valued, we feel safe. We feel safe to share our opinions, our thoughts, our feelings, to have conversation with those people. When we feel sympathy, we're guarded, because I don't really want you feeling sorry for me. If you have ever been sick or through a difficult situation, the last thing you want is sympathy. You want empathy. You want someone to go, you know what? I understand. No wonder you're feeling that way. It's natural for you to feel that way. Like, you know, to give them that validation of that their feelings are very normal in that time. And that's huge, because if we don't have that, then there's a barrier between us and that other person. So that's one of the most important things to know and understand, is the difference between empathy and sympathy. And I think we've been taught to be sympathetic towards people, but like Susan mentioned, I think our natural human tendency is to take that and kind of make it in a condescending way. And we have to be careful of that. And so empathy and sympathy are very different. They are not the same thing by any means. A couple things in the chat box. Deborah, like saying, I know how you feel when you can't. Yes. You know, like, I'm trying to think. Yeah, and I'll just, Kim echoes, yes. Like I've lost, I've had a couple of miscarriages. And that's a tough one. I don't want someone to say, I know how you feel. No, you don't. You don't know my feelings. But it would have been nice for someone to say, you know, it's so understanding or so understandable for you to feel very, whatever I had said I felt, or so understandable for this to be such a crushing weight on you right now. Thank you. Yes. Because you don't know how I feel. You don't know what my lenses are. And so we have to be really careful. We have all these pat sayings as Americans. So we have to be careful. Deborah, so powerful. I hope we all catch ourselves the next time you say, I know how you feel. No, we don't. We can maybe imagine. And I say that, like, especially when it comes to someone that has experienced a loss, like death. You know, I can't imagine how you're feeling right now. And just allowing that space to be able to be free to communicate. All right. So I'm going to jump right quickly to the next one, because I think we're going to spend a lot of time here. So if you're taking notes, this will be kind of fun. So there's two main dimensions in human behavior and communication. So we respond in two different ways. We either ask or tell, or we emote or control, those two separate things, okay? So this will help us, I'll just keep putting in the information in the slide so I don't confuse you. So we either ask or tell when we approach a situation in conversation, or we emote or control, not control. You like that sign language, girls? Not control like the reins of a horse, which is, I think, what that is referencing. But control like our emotions. Have you ever met someone who's so controlled with their emotions that they almost like, do you feel anything? They control their emotions. So I want to make sure we clarify that I'm not talking about a controlling personality that wants to control everything around them. I'm talking about, do you emote your emotions or do you control your emotions? Okay. So that will make sense as we drop in the next information. So our assertiveness is how we approach this. Someone who is maybe less assertive would be asking more questions. Someone who's very assertive, they just tell you what to do. Our responsiveness, that's how we respond to emotion. Do we emote emotion? So can I pick on Kim? Yes, okay. It's probably no doubt that Kim emotes emotion. Everything about her, when she speaks, her tone, her face, her hands, like you feel her emotions no matter what she's saying, good, bad, and ugly. She is very much an emoter of emotion. Some people are more controlled. So knowing that will help us in how we respond to them. So there's 4 basic styles of people. So this is like a quadrant. You've seen a leadership quadrant before, so this is similar. So everything on this side is, oh gosh, I'm gonna get all these wrong. Okay, so these are, oh no, I knew I was gonna do that, sorry. Love those screens that are super sensitive. I'm trying to point, but you can't see my fingers. And all right, so the amiable and expressive, that's the emoting side of person. The analytical and driver, that's the controlling side of a person. An analytical and an amiable person tend to ask more, and a driver and expressive tend to tell more. How much sense does that make? Like a nod of heads. You can nod either direction. Like, makes me laugh. My poor little brother, he just could not, he would say yes like that all the time when we were kids. He'd shake his head no and say yes. We would be like, which one is that? So I want to show you this because it's so important that we learn to appreciate the different styles of communication. So one of the concepts that I like to introduce in the LMI programs that I facilitate is understanding what these 4 interpersonal styles are. So you have your driver, you have your expressive, you have your amiable, and you have your analytical. And so understanding how that person that we're wanting to communicate to, how do they, what is their style of communication? Is it imperative? And I've met some people before, they're kind of hard-nosed, and they'll say, well, it doesn't matter. I'm not changing my style for anybody. I am what I am. And if they want to hear me, they're going to learn to listen to me. You know, I'm going to take a wager that probably not too many people listen to them, and their effectiveness is limited because of their limiting beliefs that they can't change. So we do need to change how we communicate, and that's not masking and it's not faking. It's learning and understanding that if I want Lori to hear my message and respond, then I must speak the way Lori speaks. I must speak in a way that she speaks. If I want someone that's super quiet and they're very analytical, I'm a story person, I'm a detail person, I'm very expressive. I got to tone that down, and it's just going to give the facts if I want that analytical person to really hear me out. So I'm going to go to the next slide because we're going to break these down even further. So an analytical person, they're low in their responsiveness. So in other words, they're not all about hand motions and the big, big expressive eyes, and they're also low in their assertiveness. So they're more objective and task oriented. They prefer to ask questions than to tell. They're typically reserved, and they have very high emotional control. They live life with facts, principles, and logic, and they react slowly in a disciplined, deliberate way. And then 2 more, they gather all their information before making decisions. If you've ever lived or interacted or had to work on a project with an analytical and you're not, it's fun because they have to have all the details before they can go forward. And they're motivated by a very deep desire to be right. So knowing that will really, really help you with communication. And so that's me. Is that you, Lori? Excellent. Oh, that's super good to know. So I just think that's funny. So is anybody taking notes, still writing? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to leave it on there. What questions would you have while some people are still writing regarding the analytical style? Not that I have all the answers, but I might have one. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, Susan, go ahead.
I do. I would be interested, without diverting the whole rest of your presentation, for a quick discussion on when that person is your supervisor or in a supervisory capacity over you, and that might not be your style, the best way to approach them, because indeed they do have the ability to say yes and no quickly, or if they don't agree with your research.
So the person that you report to is more of an analytical style? Okay, so yes, so that a couple slides down, I have a layout of basically if that's their personality, this is how you respond.
Perfect.
Okay, and if you still have more questions after that, just flag me. Anybody else? Somebody is connecting. Nan. I'm not sure who Nan is. Do you have a question, or are you just joining us? Oh, I don't think your audio is quite working. Oh, I just moved something. I think we're good. Okay, so Nan, I still can't hear you, but while you're figuring out what your audio is, Lori, I just wanted to respond. It can be very constricting, like perfectionism, she put in the chat. Yes, oh, I did go too far. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Yes, because you're motivated by this deep desire to be right? That's what motivates someone that's analytical, is they want to be right. They don't want to make the wrong decision. So you're going to gather all that information. You're going to be slow in how you react, because if you're impulsive, you could make the wrong decision, right? So that makes a lot of sense for someone who is analytical. So let's go to the driver. They're all fun to work with. Well, there's actually one that's probably more fun, literally. Anyhow, let's just go on. So the driver is low in response and high in assertiveness. So this person, they measure value and personal worth by results. They're all about the results. In business, they're about the bottom line. They're highly assertive and highly objective, so they can make quick decisions like that. They concentrate on the task rather than people. In other words, they would rather be working on a spreadsheet and crunching numbers than they would maybe interacting with the people on the floor if it were I was distracted by the cute little snuggle there. No worries. Driver is someone is quick to speak and direct others. They won't let things simmer. They will address things. They're not afraid to be confrontational because they don't view confrontation as a negative. But if you got a splinter, why in the world would you let it sit, right? Because like this is going to hurt in a couple of hours because I've let it sit for a couple of hours already. So someone that is a driver would just say, I'm going to confront because I want it out in the open and I want a healthy relationship. A driver makes independent decisions. They don't feel the need to necessarily check with the committee. They tend to be serious, persistent, and industrious. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just saw Lori's last comment. So anybody here identify as a driver? I can't see. Kim, you're a driver so far. Okay. And anybody else? Peggy? Of course, I can't see. There's a few of you that don't have your video.
I identify with everything except working on spreadsheets other than people.
Okay. Do you like the people aspect more than tasks? Okay.
Yeah, but I am task oriented, but I was like, I'm a driver until you got to that point, and I'm like, nope, put me on the floor, but everything else matched up.
Okay.
I want to be surrounded by people, but task oriented. Does that work?
I love it. That's funny. I think what a lot of people find, and again, the group that I worked with this afternoon, they were going through this in their lesson. It just so happened to be this particular lesson. And so a couple of them said, well, I'm like an expressive driver, or I'm an amiable analytical. So they felt like they were kind of a combination, which is not uncommon at all. And we're very adaptable as people. So like if I were to go back to myself 20 years ago, gosh, I could even go back 30 years ago and I was still an adult. If I were to go back 30 years ago, I am a totally different person than I am now, just because life shapes us. And so we change. So that is a driver. Anybody else taking notes? Still, Peggy, I'm sorry. Peggy, I can always go back. So just let me know if I went too fast and you were not done. So here is the expressive. So I kind of took a wild stab in the dark that Kim might be expressive. I think she definitely has some high tendencies here. a person that's expressive is high in response and high in assertive. They place more importance on the relationship, than the task that's supposed to say. So the T is for task. They are intuitive and impulsive. Sometimes we cringe at the word impulsive, especially if it's being attached to us. We're like, I don't know. But they don't mind a good risk. If that risk is going to help them out and give them a gain, they'll take it. They're intuitive, meaning they just have this sense. If they're spiritual-based people, that intuition comes from a higher power. Some people are just very in tune with what is going on around them. So they're very intuitive, and yet they're impulsive, meaning they will take that risk. They place value on power and politics. They're motivated to gain personal recognition. I like to explain this one kind of. Some people will do a great job because that's just who they are. And they don't want a lot of like foo-foo. They don't want a lot of praise, public, in fact, they cringe if you were to announce over the loudspeaker at work that, Susan did such a fantastic job on her presentation. And maybe Susan's like, oh, where's that hole I can hide in, right? I just did a good job because that's who I am. But someone that is, and I'm just picking on you, Susan, someone that's expressive, they'll be like, yes, I did a good job. That's awesome. I finally got that recognition. Like they view recognition very differently. They're very creative, imaginative, and very stimulating in conversation. They change course very easily, which means they're visionaries. And they don't necessarily, I think that's major typos here. They don't focus on the data, not at all, or the data. I'm not afraid to recognize my own mistakes. So now you know that these are my slides and I did not steal them from someone. So an expressive personality. So Jennifer, I can see the driver, but some expressive too. Yeah, and it could be, Kim, that you might be a combination of the two. So how many of you would say that you feel like you're more on the expressive side? Anybody kind of connect with that one? Mm-hmm. Yes, Susan, I would fully agree. And I don't know if that, so Lynette, here's an interesting for Lynette and Susan, you can put it up in the chat. How much does sign language impact your expressiveness? Do you feel like it has any kind of bearing? You're like, little? I think it's, because I know both of you very much so. Okay. I know that, I don't know as nearly as much as either one of them. I worked with a deaf group in Canada when I lived there. And one of my friends who was profoundly deaf, and she studied at, is it Gallaudet University in Washington, DC? And she would have me come over for tea. And she was like helping me, giving me tips and pointers because I'm kind of learning. And she would say, it's all about here. If you're sad, you can't say I'm sad. No, your face has to match your signs. Yeah. And it's so, being expressive in sign language, it tells the story so much more profoundly. But kind of like our voice, for those of us that are hearing, our tone of voice, someone that is expressive, you want to hear them reading a story. I listen to audible books, books on tape, however you say that. I've listened to a few that I'm pretty sure that whoever the person is reading the story, I could listen to anything they say, because I just love their voice, their intonations, their tone, that everything about their voice was just soothing. And then there have been others and I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to listen to a whole chapter on this. Their voice is very droning. Yes. Okay. Excellent. Love the comments. So the expressive personality, high in response, high in assertiveness. So that leaves us one more. And then we're going to get into how does this help me? The amiable person, they're high in response, but low in assertiveness. So they place high priority on cooperation of relationships. So they want everyone to get along. That's very important to them. You want an amiable person on your team because they will make sure everybody on the team gets along. They are dependable, they are supportive, and they are very respectful. They place value on being accepted. So anybody not liking them is like, oh, you know, whereas maybe a driver doesn't care. But an amiable person, they're like, oh my goodness, like they don't like me. Why? What did I do? So they place a lot of value on being respectful. They use understanding and mutual respect to gain cooperation from others. They take time to share their feelings. Unlike the analytical, who will just, they have the same feelings, they just don't feel that need to share them. The amiable person also feels comfortable with the known, and their normal, natural self is to avoid risks. So how many of you feel like you might be on the amiable side? Maybe you resonate more with amiable. We got a couple. That was like Lynette, that was kind of a hesitant. Anybody else? Amiable? Yeah, Jennifer. Okay, Barb's shaking her head. That was a Baptist nod. I love it. And no offense, I just think that's funny. I love it. Amiable. So an amiable person, yeah, definitely someone that you want. Lori, you're identifying with, like, yes, I'm all of them. So there's actually quizzes that you can take. I'm sure Jennifer would have a lot to say in this because this kind of dabbles into a little bit of what Jennifer does. But we have a little bit of everything in us, but we have a tendency to be more one than the other. And so identifying who am I? And then also like the people that are closest to me that I communicate with, whether it's family, if you're married or you have children, or if you live with someone that's a family member, if you're not an entrepreneur, solo entrepreneur, you've got people you work with. What is their communication style? If you can identify that, this next slide hopefully will answer Susan's first question. How does this help me? So with the analytical person, you're going to relate to them with detailed fact and logic, keeping it short and simple. With the amiable person, you're going to maximize your results by slowing down, providing detail, and personal attention. If you want my attention, invite me over for a cup of coffee and just talk to me. I would just love that. That would make me so happy. That is how you speak to me. Okay. I am expressive, but I'm more amiable than anything else. The expressive person, you want to work with them by giving them freedom, flexibility, recognition, and then incentives. The expressive people, they're the doers. They're the ones that get things done. They're the dreamers. They come up with ideas like, Kim, you have to be expressive. I think you have to be like so expressive because you are such a visionary in personality. You always have like something. I don't think your brain ever stops. You just always have ideas. So tell me what thoughts come to your mind.
Yeah, I think I lean more towards expressive, but Deb posted in the comments that she feels like she's bits and pieces of all of them.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say I'm bits and pieces of all of them by no means, but I definitely would lean more towards expressive with a wee bit of driver, I think.
Wee bit of driver.
But definitely expressive. When you started to go, when you talked about a driver, that kind of sounded like me to a certain degree.
Right.
But then when you started talking about expressive, I'm like, oh wait, that's probably way more me.
Yeah. And then who did we say who resonated with the driver? Did anybody on the call today? Peggy, for sure. Peggy and Julie. So and Nan, did you raise your hand? Yeah. Oh, you're muted. Kim, maybe you can unmute her. Oops. Wait. Sorry. Okay. Excuse me. Kim, can you unmute Nan? No?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Nan. Yes.
Okay. I think that it depends upon what the subject matter is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we can be all of them at different times, depending upon the audience.
That's really, really good point.
I mean, it all depends upon the audience. I mean, I can be, when I'm in front of a person that is speaking about something that I'm not knowledgeable about, I'm all ears.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to interrupt them unless I have a question down the road, because I'm really actively listening.
It's good.
But I think unless you're a loner, if you will, or if you just learn, you don't have a personality at all, which, some IT people are like that. They don't need to be talking to people. They just hone in on what they're doing all the time, and they don't mind isolation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it depends upon who your audience is.
Yeah. And life shapes us, like I mentioned 30 years ago, but the road that I've taken and the paths that I've had to cross, I've had to be work on that driver part of me. Mm-hmm. I had a job for a couple of years when I first moved here. I hated it, by the way. But it was I did books, like financial stuff. Oh my goodness, there's hardly any analytical bone in my body. That was so hard. And I did it really, I did it well, because I think that's just whatever I do, I do it with all my might. But I was miserable, so miserable. So there's there are little bits in all of us based on your audience, based on what you've had to do. We have to, and especially, do we have all women on the call? I think we do today. Yeah, I'm scanning the names and the faces. So I think women too, that's our superpower, is that we can adapt so much easier than I think men, but we'll go on. That's another conversation. And the drivers need that independence. They need that individuality. And they're the people that have the tendency to just kind of take control. And, if there's nobody at the helm, they'll take over. And so there's a little bit of me in that. I was on a Zoom call. It was kind of funny. My former boss, the gentleman that I worked for while I lived in Canada, he's been doing since March a weekly, a mastermind group, I guess. There's probably 30, 40 different people on there. It's at 7 a.m. So it's super early, but I'm an early bird, and I love it because I just feel very energized because of the content of the conversation. So I join it every Friday morning. And this last week, I was a few minutes early. So I'm just sitting there drinking my coffee, and the guy that's in charge of it, he's punctual to capital P, to the moment, okay, it's 7 o'clock, we're going to start. And he's that's very important to him. And so it's 7, and Gabrielle is not there. And then it's 7:01. Does anybody know where Gabe is? 7:02. And so at 7:03, I'm well, I could start a conversation. And I just kind of started asking questions just to get the cars, because it was just awkward. At that point, there were 30 people on there and nobody's talking, and just everybody's staring at each other with a Zoom call. So I just kind of started asking questions, and come to find out they had some technical issues and they couldn't log on. So it was kind of funny. So the little driver in me came out, but that's not my normal. So yes, it's interesting. So I'm going to move right along, because the next part that we wanted to talk about in communication and how that impacts our productivity is asking powerful questions. I can remember back into grade school, asking questions. I used to ask tons and tons and tons of questions. I was so curious and inquisitive. And I remember classmates that would make fun of me, and even a few teachers say, well, that's a silly question. And then I had this one teacher, And she said, Karen, there are no silly questions and there are no stupid questions. She said, every question has value. And, I became very quiet, but I remember that, like that meant a lot that she would say that to me. So learning not how to ask the right questions, but powerful questions is so important. So again, I was having a conversation with someone regarding communication, and the question was asked, what is an example of like an open-ended or an empowering question? And this person's response was, do you know why that happened? And I said, okay, so how can I answer that? I said, what are my options to answer that? And he goes, well, yes or no. And I said, okay, so how powerful is that? Whereas if you ask, what do you think caused that to happen that way? Now, all of a sudden, my conversation is totally changed. If I say, do you know why you did that? Lori, why did you do that? Do you know why you did that? I put you on the defense. And you're probably not, you're going to go, no, I don't want to, especially you saying that you feel like you're the analytical, you don't want to be wrong. So like I ask you, why'd you do that? My tone, everything about what I said feels like you did something wrong. So you're not going to be as apt to talk and communicate. Whereas if I say, Lori, that's interesting. Tell me why you made that decision. Like what made you come to that conclusion? Now all of a sudden you're going to be like, well, I looked at this, and then I thought about that. And I thought, well, this makes the most sense. And now I can take empathy and go, well, no wonder you made that decision. I never thought of it that way. And all of a sudden now I have empathy, and we can actually talk about what the problem is and find a solution instead of blaming people and making people feel defensive. So asking powerful questions is really important and powerful. So here's $1 million communication technique. I'm going to share with you 4 of them. Not sure why we call them $1 million communication techniques, but they're powerful. So number 1, ask open-ended questions. So my rule of thumb for that is what qualifies an open-ended question. If it starts with what, where, why, who, sometimes how, and when, I can't answer that with a yes or no. Now, I say sometimes how. How many of you have teenagers or know a teenager? Anybody? Yeah, okay, I see hands. If you ask a teenager, how was school today? You might, I don't even know if you get fine. You'll get a grunt, right? It's not open-ended. If you ask them, hey, what was the most interesting thing at school today? You might actually get them stopped to think. I don't know. I used to ask my daughter when there was school. That sounds so funny to say. I'd ask her, what was the best part of your day? Every day. And she'd be like, oh, Mom. But I wanted her to talk, and I wanted her to get out, draw that out of her. So asking open-ended questions is huge. If you start your sentence with do, is, that's a statement with a question mark. It's not a question. So make sure if you're conditioned to ask questions like, did you take out the trash? That's a closed-ended question. They can only answer it 2 ways, yes or no. So if you want to have communication, ask open-ended questions. Number 2, men struggle with this one. But instead of asking someone, hey, Lori, tell me what you think about this conversation today about communication. What do you think about that? I don't know the lens that Lori has on, but she may immediately go, uh-oh, what if what I'm thinking isn't right? Like, I don't want to respond. So I'm just going to sit here quiet and make it awkward for everybody. But if I ask her, hey, how do you feel? How did you feel about our conversation today? Well, now she can say, hey, that was really interesting. So if you say think versus a feel, think, you can cause someone to feel like they could be wrong, but we're never wrong in how we feel. How we feel is how we feel. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. Our emotions are where we are that day. They're not right or wrong. They are. The 2-choice method, if you have children, grandchildren, adults in your life, the 2-choice method is like, the angels singing, ah, They're singing hallelujah in the background. Two-choice method is powerful. So how many of you have ever gotten into an argument about where you're going to eat for dinner or what you can eat? Right? I am convinced that that is like the number one topic to cause a really good mood to go south fast. Because no one cares, but you really do care, because when someone makes a choice, the person that said, I don't care, really did. And it's like, we had Italian last night. So using the two-choice method is super powerful. So you simply offer that person that you're communicating with two choices that work for you. So if you've ever had an appointment with me, 9 times out of 10, I will say, hey, can you meet Tuesday at 9, or would Thursday at 4 be better for you? Both times work for me. You get to choose. You're in charge. I don't care, because both of them work for me and I'm happy. And at the end of the day, we're both happy because you've chosen one that works for you. Or you may come back and go, actually, you know what? I'm completely booked this week. I'll say, hey, give me 2 choices that work for you. I throw it back on them and they do the same thing. So use this the next time you choose which takeout you're going to have, since we can't go to restaurants yet, and offer 2 that matter to you. So good way to my heart, 2 different ways is Mexican and Italian. I just love food in general. Mediterranean, that might trump them all, but Mexican and Italian would always make me happy. It doesn't matter which. I love both. So if my husband's like, hey, let's go out tonight, I'll just say, okay, how about Mexican or Italian? Then he chooses, and no fighting on the way. And no, we don't eat Burger King. Love that, Erin. I'm sorry, I was slow getting to that. I always ask my kids, what was fun, new, or exciting about your day? Lori, is your I need more time if someone asks you what you want? You'll have to unmute yourself. I need clarification.
No, it was in response to you, if somebody asked me what I thought about something.
Oh, yes, I need more time to think, right? You want a buffer to figure, I want to say the right words. Yeah, makes sense. So the 2-choice method is phenomenal. Great with kids because, you give them 2 choices, they both work for you. Great with everybody, to be completely honest. And the last one is really powerful. If you are a driver and you have a tendency to tell people what to do all the time, try using this. Hey, I need your help. Instead of telling somebody, I need you to do this, what if you say, hey, I need your help? Kind of struggling with something right now. I had a splinter. And instead of telling, I need someone to tell me right now what to do, I just said, hey, does anybody have any suggestions for getting a splinter out of a fingernail bed? And guess what? A couple of you said, hey, soak it in Epsom salt. So that's my agenda when we close today. So saying I need your help is absolutely huge. There's a couple others that I'll share with you. Another favorite one of mine that I love to use, and I say these over and over again until they feel natural and they just naturally come out in conversation. But tell me about that. So I don't know how many of you are, I'm hesitant to use the word emotional, but that one person that can just take you from 0 to 60 really fast. Does everybody have, am I the only one?
No.
Okay. Okay. So when I have that, first of all, I'm learning to be curious about myself. And so when I have a reaction that I'm maybe not so proud of, instead of judging myself and being like, that was so stupid, Karen, you know better. I wonder what caused me to react that way. So being curious, let go of the judgment. And then the second thing is, let's say I'm in the moment and someone says something and I'm like, oh my goodness, just all my emotions, I can feel them bubbling up. If I simply pull myself back and say, hey, tell me about that. If someone just says, I'm really ticked. I don't like how you responded. You called me out on that webinar and you just made me feel so embarrassed. Tell me about that. And then they go on. And I'm like, you know what? I have the opportunity now to address it and say, I never thought of it that way. And, I want you to forgive me for saying that or for calling you out, or have that opportunity now to have the conversation where we can find resolve. So tell me about it is a really powerful phrase. Any questions on some of those techniques? You can either unmute yourself or throw it up in the chat.
Karen, I use that, tell me more about that a lot. Well, in business, I need to remember it more in my personal conversations. But yeah, I use that one quite a bit, like that one.
Tell me about it in business is really, really good too. If someone's speaking to you and you're like, I don't understand what they're saying, and you're like afraid to let them on, just say, hey, tell me more about that. And it's amazing because you're going to get more insight and maybe an aha moment. And everybody likes to share their story, whatever their story is. I thought I heard my dog in here with me. Okay, so she's the timeout dog. All right, so the last thing I want to share with you today, and then we're going to just like open up for some conversation and any questions. I'm far from an expert on it. This is something I've been like actively learning and actively applying in my life. But the last one is listening for the total message. Too many of us listen to respond instead of listening to hear. And so to change that, we have to slow ourselves down. And I'm going to take a sip of water. So on this chart here that you see, there are three basic areas that impact communication that for the total message. So words, believe it or not, are 10% of the message. You know, I don't know the movie. I'm so bad with movie references, but it's this guy, do you understand the words coming out of my mouth? What was that movie? Nobody knows. Shoot. Does nobody know that one? Oh, this is awful. It's not The Money Pit. Oh, something about money. The guy was mad and he was like, don't you understand the words coming right out of my mouth? No, because it's more than words. Sounds, you know, again, I think kids give us great references. I mean, us women, good gravy, we are the best at this. If we're ticked, we don't need to say a word. It's the little, you know, the grunts, little tiny sounds that we make, that accounts for 30% of the message. Unbelievable. But more importantly is our body language. I think that's why COVID-19 has been really hard on so many people, is because we're not seeing each other. We're only seeing part of each other. But body language is huge. It accounts for 60% of the total message. We've got to stop speaking code. And we do that all the time. We use generic words like being effective. We want to improve things. It has no meaning but to us. So to the recipient, that same word that we may use means something completely different to them. So as a manager, if you say to the person that's reporting to you, you know, you really need to improve your communication skills. What is that person hearing? Maybe he's hearing that he has to say more words. And he's like, great. Like maybe he's analytical and he's like, more words are not necessary. Really? So that would be a great time for the person hearing to go, well, tell me about that. What does that look like? What does that mean to you? Clarify. The only one who really knows what that means is the manager until the questions are asked. So what commonly happens is that the recipient quickly interprets what's being said. So if someone says, you know, hey, you know, John, I've noticed that you seem to be very distracted lately, and I noticed that your desk is kind of messy. And so maybe if you cleaned up your desk, it might help you be more organized, and then you would not feel so rushed. what do you think John is hearing? He's like, oh, my desk. Oh, okay. What's wrong with my desk? I like my desk. I know where all my little papers are, right? So it does not a clear message. So we're not clear. So instead, we could say, well, hey, I noticed that you've been like distracted in some of your projects. What are some ways that we could help you bring some focus back in? So make sure that we're clear when we talk and not talk in code. And I don't think we realize how often we talk in code. Hugely important, is that a word? Avoid selective listening. And I know that we always have heard that the other gender has selective listening skills, but we have it too. So avoid selective listening, hear what's being said. For some of us, this is hard. Silence. Learn to be silent. If you ask a question, give that person time to process, think, and then respond. How do they want to respond? If they feel rushed, they're probably not going to share with you what they really feel. And the last thing is to use reflective responses. So if somebody shares something with you, kind of reflect back what they said, because that tells them that you were listening, and that's powerful. All right. Looking at the time.
I gotta jump off here.
Okay, yeah, you know what? Good timing, because the last what I have here is I've just got a list of books if you love to read. I like to do the Audible books, but then I'm a big paper book person as well. So some of my favorite ones that have to do with communication are QBQ, John Miller, a great book. Never Eat Alone. Everybody Always by Bob Goff. Oh my goodness. That's like, there's no better time to read that book than right now, because there's so many like angry people. We just need to read that book. If you, does everybody know who Bob Goff is?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
Search on him. Well, and no, not everybody in the world would know. I just found out about him. I think he came to Peoria. He's a philanthropist. He was a lawyer, philanthropist, public speaker, author, and he just writes, oh my goodness, the book is phenomenal. It just makes you want to like live so much more intentional and so much kinder. Free to Focus by Michael Hyatt is great if you want to be a little more productive. He will help you kind of organize yourself. And Crucial Conversations, which is, yeah, I got the Bob's, my secrets out here. Oh, what is that one? Lead what? Nikki.
I'm happy that I've read most of these books, so this is good.
Oh yeah.
John Q. Miller is amazing. John Miller. This one is How to Lead When You're Not in Charge.
Ooh,
Leveraging
love it.
Influence When You Lack Authority.
Love it.
Really good. It's how to be with integrity and doing your homework and showing that you're right or you're willing to find what's the right thing.
Yeah.
It's really good. So
is Crucial Conversations. This, I have not read this one yet. This one has come so highly, like if you have, we all know those conversations that we need to have that maybe we avoid because the outcome is so, like everything's hinging on it. This is a book that you would want to read beforehand. Like it's very powerful. Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High. I love to share tips like that because I think that's super important. I will Google Rush Hour. Oh, is that another one? Another book, Barbara? I don't know where you went.
Who's that by? That Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High?
That by Forward is by Stephen Covey. It's got four different people. Find the right angle here.
Thank you. Is that Stephen Hope?
Oh, you know what? Hovey.
H-O-V-E-Y?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High. Bob Goff, that's just a great read. Yeah. And then I'll just share one more thing. And then if you have to pop off for time reason, and I so appreciate everybody that's on right now because especially with COVID-19 and all of us primarily being kind of at home, look, this is supper time. So thank you for carving out time to be with us today. So
Karen. Thank you.
My hubby's making dinner. I'm like so excited. I told him
Thank
all
you.
this weekend. Thank
Italian or Mexican?
you. It's his own thing. He's cooking, so I'm like, oh, whatever. I told him everybody's got to take a turn this week because I said I have a crazy week and I need some help. So see, and I said I need your help, and that's what happened. So communication is only effective when we communicate in a way that is meaningful to the recipient, not ourselves. And that's by Rich Simmons. He's another author, so you could look him up and see what books he might have available. I actually had Lori Trotter a note by my desk at one point saying that apply duct tape now to remind me not to just talk, but to listen and step back. Oh, I love that. That's such a great, like, physical reminder. Never Eat Alone is a great book. I have that too. Oh, that's the movie that I referenced. Rush Hour. Yeah, that's what it was. Okay.
Who's the author on Never Eat Alone?
That's, I'm going to say Simon Sinek. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Is it Simon Sinek? No, we don't know. Never Eat Alone.
It was on your last slide.
It's
Oh, it was?
Okay.
It's Keith Ferrazzi.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have that one on my nightstand. So yeah, those are just some books that I either have purchased and have not yet read because they're on my reading list, or I have read and really love them. So I always try to put some of those on there. And let me skip back over. So that's it. That is all I had for today. I think there was one other thing I was going to share, and now my mind is blank.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you all
Thank
for being like an active part of the conversation today. I like it much better when it's interactive than just me talking to a little green dot. But I can see your faces, so that helps, and I can see you. So
Good to see all of you.
Yeah, so it's super good to see everybody. I just really encourage you, like, I know this was on communication, but just something I've learned over my vast, 50 years of life. It's not really that vast. Is that when someone's name pops into your head, act on it. There's a reason that person's name. I just think now more than ever, connection is so important. So if it means picking up your phone and calling them, sending them a text, an email. I had a random thought the other day. Someone that I know, she lives alone. She's going through has some difficult family issues as well. But she's all alone because of the lovely quarantine. And I'm going to the grocery store to pick up something for supper, and her name popped into my head, and I immediately thought of flowers. And I'm like, God, no, I don't want to spend more money. trying to hold on to my money, right? And I could not get the thought out of my head. And so finally I just did it, and I bought her some of those little like miniature roses. And I like staring at the colors, and I'm a pretty plain person, as you can see by my decor behind me. And so I'm like looking at like the beigey and the whites and the pale muted colors. And my daughter pulls out like this bright pink, and she goes, "What about this one, Mom?" I'm like, "Well, that's a lot of pink." And she goes, "Yeah, it's a really pretty." And so I bought that, texted this person. I said, "Hey, what's your address?" And I just dropped it off at her door, and that made her day. And then she texted me a picture the next day. The flowers are in a vase. It's in her living room. It matches everything in her house. And I was like, "Oh, how beautiful." But I don't say that to, not for me, but I really just want to encourage you to act on those impulses that we have. You never know how something so small or simple as a text of, "Hey, how are you doing? I'm just thinking about you," especially now, means so much. So I'm going to shut up, and any questions or comments you guys have, you can just unmute yourselves. Thank you guys for the comments.
Very timely. I have a report due tomorrow, and it's due to somebody who supervises me. Okay. And our communication styles are vastly different. Our personalities are different. Gender, cultural, communication differences, I tend to provide the facts requested and then all this, you know, further expansion. And it is not effective at all. And then I get frustrated. And so I'm going back to that report probably tonight and eliminate some of my feeling words and focus on the short and the objective.
Yep.
Timely.
I love that, the feeling words. I feel you, Sue. I really do. I like the feeling words.
And it's not effective with this person. I don't, you know, feeling words do not factor into their decision at all. And I just don't get it. But, you know, so, but the goal is communicating with them, the recipient, not me. So that's the second takeaway.
Right.
That's so true.
Thank you.
That's great. Well, so I don't forget, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now for those that might be watching at a later time. So we really appreciate having you all and appreciate you coming back and watching later. And Karen, what a fantastic job. And I totally see the correlation of better communication and time management. I mean, think about, you know, how much time we could waste if we're not communicating properly. When we communicate properly, when we understand, you know, who we're talking to and make it more productive, then it improves our productivity all the way around. So great job.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to stop the recording. Okay. Awesome.